We're all unique in our own way, but at the end of the day, we're all human. No matter how different we seem and are, we're all wired with the same instincts, desires, and tendencies. The more you understand these patterns, the more control you have over your own actions and the way you navigate the world around you. Welcome back to the It Girl Playbook. Today, we are going to explore The Laws of Human Nature by Robert Greene. The purpose of this book, as the author says, is to stop pointing fingers at everyone else and to recognize that you and I both have certain traits as well. We have a dark side. We can be short-sighted. We're emotional, sometimes irrational, but that's all part of being human. It's in our biological nature, but it's looking inwards and recognizing these traits that allow us to understand it, not to beat yourself up for it, to say that you're a terrible person or that you're weak and you're bad, but to give you the awareness and therefore power to change them if it is causing you more harm than good, to control it rather than have it control you. And so with that said, let's get right into it, starting with law number 1, the law of irrationality. Master your emotional self. We all think we're in control of our lives, our careers, our friendships, and even the words that come out of our mouth. But in reality, our emotions have a much stronger influence over us than we realize. Whether it's anger, fear, jealousy, or excitement, our emotions often cloud our judgment, and in the heat of the moment, we tend to make decisions based on emotions rather than logic. This is the law of irrationality. This isn't something to be shameful about. We're all human, and being emotional is in our nature. For thousands of years, emotions have been essential for survival. Fear kept us alert to danger, anger helped us defend our tribes, and excitement motivated us to explore and take risks. They add depth to our experiences, but that doesn't discount the fact that because emotions drive much of our decision making, it can also distort our reality, especially in a situation that may seem urgent or when you're truly in a state of desperation. We tend to be even more impulsive. Sometimes it can become some of the best decisions you've ever made, but other times it can lead to choices we later regret. Some classic examples that I think we can all relate to is when we get into heated disagreements, and in the heat of the moment, you can say something that is really hurtful, and even if you didn't really mean it, the damage is still already done. Or when you're overly excited in the moment and find yourself overcommitting to things that you may not have the capacity for, but you've already made the promise. It's okay to take a step back and tell the other person that you need some time or space before responding. Being excited or frustrated isn't a problem. They're emotions that we all have, but it does become a problem when you allow those emotions to control your decisions. To master your emotional self, you must create space between your emotions and your actions. This doesn't mean suppressing your feelings, it simply means acknowledging them while choosing to respond rationally rather than impulsively. Becoming rational doesn't mean becoming emotionless, it simply means becoming emotionally intelligent, where we understand why we feel what we feel so that we can consciously choose actions that align with our goals, not just our impulses. Because when you learn to pause, observe, and respond rather than react, you gain control over your life in a way that most people will never get the chance to. This is rationality, and it's a skill that needs to be cultivated, but once we attain it, it can become such a valuable asset. Law number 2, the law of narcissism, transforming self-love into empathy. Narcissism is often portrayed as an extreme, exaggerated sense of self-importance, and at its core, we all have a degree of narcissism within us. It's part of human nature to crave attention, validation, and admiration. In fact, our survival instincts are wired to seek approval from others. For much of history, fitting in with a tribe or gaining favor with leaders was crucial for survival. We all have moments of self-focus, whether we want to admit it or not. Some people may exhibit this more overtly, but narcissism in its simplest form is simply self-interest. It can also be interpreted as a form of self-love. However, when this need for validation becomes distorted, it can lead to destructive behaviors and unhealthy relationships. This is the law of narcissism. Humans are wired for self-preservation as well as connection, which is why our need for validation and self-esteem is essential. While a healthy level of narcissism, like nurturing your self-esteem, is important, it can also become very dangerous when it tips into excessive self-centeredness. This not only harms the narcissist, but it also negatively impacts the people around them. In the modern world, narcissism often manifests in subtle ways. We've all encountered people who constantly need to be in the center of attention, or those who believe they deserve special treatment. We all have moments where we indulge in self-importance when we focus too much on our own needs or when we seek validation from others. This is natural. It's how we affirm our self-worth. But the law of narcissism warns us against letting this self-focus evolve into an obsession with being admired or superior. The key is to acknowledge this part of ourselves rather than deny it. Instead of resisting our natural self-interest, we can use it to our advantage. Understanding that people are driven by their own self-interest allows you to navigate social interactions more effectively. For example, if you want to persuade or influence someone, appealing to their self-interest will almost always be more effective than appealing to logic alone. People care about themselves first, and so framing things in a way that benefits them will make you more persuasive and therefore influential. This is how you master the art of negotiating. This realization can also be quite liberating too. When people hurt or betray us, we can often take it personally, but in reality, most people act out of self-interest, not with the intention to harm us. While this doesn't excuse their actions, it can help let go of resentment and move forward with a clearer, less burdened perspective. By shifting your focus from self-absorption to empathy, you gain more influence, build better relationships, and free yourselves from taking things too personally. Mastering the law of narcissism means choosing awareness over ego, and in doing so, you effectively navigate this aspect of human nature where self-importance is very much present. Next, we have law number 10, the law of envy. Beware of the fragile ego. This law explores how envy is an unavoidable part of human nature. It is one of the most denied and disguised emotions we experience, with most refusing to admit to feeling it, maybe even ourselves. But envy is deeply human. Since the beginning of time, comparison was crucial for early human survival, where we had to observe and learn from those who had more food, were stronger, more skilled, or more successful in order to thrive. In modern days, we are comparing status, respect, attention, and success. Sometimes this comparison inspires us to do better. They show us what is possible. Other times, it keeps us aware of who we cannot afford to mess with. But somewhere in between, it can also breed resentment and can eventually lead to someone acting out of resentment and lead to sabotage. This is the law of envy. At its root, envy stems from comparison, and comparison is natural. Our brains are designed to assess where we stand in relation to others. It helps us understand social dynamics, where we fit in, and what's possible. But when admiration turns into resentment and another person's success make us feel smaller instead of inspired, that's when envy takes over. Most people won't admit to acting out of envy, which is why it's important to recognize these subtle signs. Envy often disguises itself as backhanded compliments, passive-aggressive jokes, or excessive criticism. I remember that there was this guy I was seeing who began to make these tiny jabs and kept mentioning how I needed to stay humble and how he could help me so that I wasn't so sensitive when it came to his jokes, sugarcoating it in a way that made it seem it was for my own good, and it sounded really convincing. But over time, I realized that these comments weren't coming from a place of genuine care. They were likely rooted in his own insecurity. I wasn't sensitive to jokes. I just didn't want to tolerate jabs disguised as jokes. Sometimes the people who are closest to us are often the ones we envy most because their success feels too familiar. It forces us to confront what we could have done or should be doing. To protect yourself from envy, be mindful of subtle digs or fake compliments. Choose wisely who you share your successes with, and if you sense envy, deflect attention away from yourself when necessary. If you find envy within yourself, shift your focus from comparison to self-improvement because as a tool, envy can be incredibly powerful. If we're honest with ourselves, envy reveals what we deeply desire. Instead of letting it get wrought into resentment, we can flip it and let it guide us. What you envy in others is often a clue about the life you secretly want. That's an opportunity for growth, not shame. Your self-worth should come from internal validation, not from external competition. We live in such an abundant world that someone else's success does not diminish your potential. The next law we have is law number 8, the law of self sabotage. Change your circumstances by changing your attitude. We all want to succeed in life, in relationships, in wealth, or in health. We set goals, make plans, dream big, but somehow, just when things start to go well, something in us hits the brakes. We procrastinate, we pick fights, we quit too early, or overthink until we talk ourselves out of it. That inner conflict, that is the law of self sabotage. Humans are wired for survival, and part of that means sticking to what is familiar, even when it no longer serves us. Our ancestors relied on routines and predictable patterns to stay safe, which is why change often feels uncomfortable or even threatening. This instinct can lead people to unconsciously self-sabotage, keeping them in these limiting cycles. At its core, self-sabotage isn't about laziness or lack of ambition. It's often about fear. Fear of failure, sure. Fear of judgment, absolutely. But more often, it's fear of success. Because success demands change. It requires you to become someone new. And that part of you that clings to familiarity, the identity you've always known, will do everything it can to keep you, quote unquote, safe, even if that safety is rooted in mediocrity or misery. This law really explores how our reality is shaped by our attitude. If our attitude is fearful, we see the negative in everything and stop ourselves from taking risks. If you approach life with suspicion and hostility, the reality will reflect that back to you. This cycle of self-sabotage keeps people stuck. However, the good news is that attitude is within your control. Just as negativity breeds more negativity, the butterfly effect of thinking more positively and abundantly means attracting better circumstances and experiences. By changing your attitude, you change your circumstances. The world reflects back what you put out. The next law we have is law number 14, the law of conformity. Resist the downward pull of the group. As humans, we're social creatures. From the moment we're born, we're wired to seek connection, acceptance, and belonging. From our ancestors, being part of a group meant survival. But in the modern world, this instinct to belong can turn into a quiet prison. We conform without realizing it, not just in how we dress or speak, but in how we think, what we believe, and what we assume is normal. This is the law of conformity, the unconscious pull to fit in, blend in, and avoid rocking the boat. Most people don't question the beliefs they inherited. They follow the crowd, play it safe, and silence the parts of themselves that feel different. But the truth is, the crowd rarely leads to greatness. It leads to comfort, and comfort rarely leads to growth. There's nothing wrong with wanting to belong, but when this desire to belong comes at the cost of authenticity, you lose touch with who you really are. Most people aren't consciously choosing their beliefs or lifestyles. They're just absorbing what's around them. And if you aren't careful, you'll wake up one day realizing that your choices weren't fully yours. They were a reflection of who you spent time with, what society expected, and the fear of standing out. Mastering the law of conformity means learning to think for yourself. The people who leave the biggest impact on the world are rarely the ones that fit in. They're the ones who chose to stand up, even if that meant being misunderstood, judged, or alone for a while. It's not easy to go against the grain, but it's even harder to live a life that isn't your own. The law works both ways. Just like you can unconsciously conform to a group that keeps you small, you can also consciously choose to surround yourself with people who expand who you are. Yes, it's true that environments shape behavior. So when you place yourself in a room full of people who think big, who take risks, and prioritize growth, it's going to rub off on you. You rise to the level of the room that you're in. This is how you can use conformity to your advantage, by curating your circle and seeking out influences that align with the version of you that you want to become, and you will naturally begin to embody that next level. It becomes easier to stay disciplined, dream bigger, and trust your voice because the people around you reflect and reinforce that energy. Mastering the law of conformity means questioning the status quo, but also being intentional all about who and what you conform to. It's not about rejecting connection. It's about choosing connection that aligns with you, your goals, and the version of you you aspire to become. The next law we have is law number 13, the law of aimlessness. Advance with a sense of purpose. One of the biggest traps that people fall into is not knowing what they truly want. They follow the expected path, school, job, routine, without question if it actually fulfills them. Over time, this leads to feeling directionless, like they're just existing instead of living. Humans are wired to seek meaning. Without a strong sense of purpose, life starts to feel empty, making people feel vulnerable to distractions, bad habits, and influences that fulfill the void but never fulfills them. We drift into distractions, overconsume, get stuck comparing ourselves to others, and feel unfulfilled even when everything looks fine on the surface. Life starts to feel like an endless to-do list rather than something we're actively building towards. This law doesn't mean you need to have every detail of your future mapped out. It's not about rigid plans or having this perfect clarity. It's about direction, a vision, something that fuels you when things get hard, something that anchors you when the world feels overwhelming. Because when you don't know who you are and what you want, someone will decide for you. Society will hand you a script. Your parents will project their unfulfilled dreams. Your parents will nudge you towards what's familiar. And before you know it, you're living a life that was never truly yours. But when you do have a direction, even if it's just a rough sketch, you move differently. You're less likely to settle. You become more discerning with your time, energy, and relationship. Every choice starts to feel meaningful because you know where you're headed. Mastering the law of aimlessness means deciding that your life deserves more than just autopilot. It means giving yourself permission to dream again, even if your dream is still evolving. You don't need to have it all figured out. You just need to start asking better questions. What excites me? What kind of life do I want to look back on? What kind of person do I want to become? Once you have those answers, start moving with intention. Life isn't about just avoiding failure. It's about making sure that when you look back, you don't regret how you spend your time. Aimlessness is easy, but direction, even if it's vague or imperfect, is power. The last law we have is law number 18, the law of death denial. Meditate on your mortality. This law might seem dark, but it's actually one of the most powerful mindset shifts that you can make. The law explains that most people avoid thinking about death. It's uncomfortable, even scary, but the truth is, denying our mortality makes us waste time. We act like we have forever, putting off dreams for some time in the future, neglecting what's important, spending time on things and people that don't truly matter, and settling for lives that don't truly fulfill us. This is the law of death denial. Our refusal to confront the impermanence of life keeps us from actually living it. When you fully accept that your time is limited, it forces you to prioritize what's truly meaningful. This is why you see so many people who encounter near-death experiences come back, and it's like their entire attitude changes and they go on to accomplish some really admirable and fulfilling goals instead of nitpicking on small things and replaying conversations that they had from when they were like 12. Facing death doesn't mean living in fear. It means living with urgency, with clarity, with intention. The truth is, no one is promised tomorrow, and that's not meant to scare you. It's meant to wake you up, to remind you that your dreams, your relationships, your peace of mind, none of that should be delayed until someday in the future. Mastering the law of death denial means learning to live with death in the room, not in a morbid way, but in a motivating one. Let it ground you. Let it remind you of what matters, because once you stop pretending that you have forever, you start doing things that actually matter now. Time is not a guarantee, it's a gift. Use it like someone who knows it can run out. All of these laws may seem different on the surface, but at their core, they remind us of one truth, and actually reminds me of the saying that your greatest victories don't come from defeating others, but from mastering yourself. And so, with that said, I hope that this episode was able to help you better understand yourself in a primal sense and help you learn more about human nature in general. Thank you so much for tuning in. I hope to see you in the next one, and in the meantime, as always, stay hot. Bye!